There's an old adage that goes, turnabout is fair play, and that's exactly what happened as the Cincinnati Bearcats blow out BYU on the road. What are the Cougars to do? Well, they're left searching for answers.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Special postcast edition here is BYU. It's blown out on the road 84-66 by the Cincinnati Bearcats, dropping BYU to 6-6 in Big 12 play, and just as good as it felt a week ago for the BYU basketball program, coming off 4 straight wins after back-to-back blowout losses, suddenly they're back in the pit of despair, as it were. I will say this, tough loss on the road, but it does not drop BYU that far in terms of their hopes for the NCAA tournament. Joe Lunardi tweeted out as kind of in the tail end of this game that with the loss, BYU dropped to his last team into the NCAA tournament in his current projections. So BYU was among the last 4. I think they were like the third to last going into that game. Speaking of getting into the NCAA tournament field per bracketology, now they've dropped 2 spots. So all in all, not a bad loss if you want to look at it in that prism. But the concern I have for this BYU basketball team is where in the world is the defense? This is a team that goes on the road and seemingly forgets that they have to be able to play cohesive team defense. And 84 points against Cincinnati after what Arizona did on Tuesday night in Provo, it's not going to cut it. Kevin Young has to get his guys on the same page and help them understand that defense has to travel. Offense will come and go. We all know that. Offense, it's if you have a hot shooting night, great. It's awesome. There's other nights you're going to struggle. The one thing you can do is you can play good, cohesive team defense. And the main thing about defense is it's effort-based. I'm seeing too many guys, and I'm not going to single out any guy here, speaking of the BYU basketball team. I'm across the roster. I am seeing guys take individual plays off, and it's absolutely crippling their defensive effort out there. There are other moments where it looks absolutely brilliant when all 5 guys are engaged and doing their thing. But far too often, there are lapses, and they are glaring, and they're absolutely crippling BYU's chances in games like this. This was a game, BYU finished the first half of this game on an absolute tear. It looked great. I think it was 20-9 was the run. Jaeger Demon has a big 3-and-1 to give BYU the lead at halftime, feeling good going into the half, and then they come out and Cincinnati puts on a 22-2 run at one point, 18-0 was the run for the Bearcats. Absolutely blitzed BYU. It was payback. Remember, a couple of weeks back when Cincinnati came to Provo, BYU absolutely put it on the Bearcats, shot 62.5% from the field from 3, ended up winning that game by 28 points. Well, as I mentioned in the open of today's show, turnabout is fair play, and that's exactly what Cincinnati, the payback, it was absolutely legitimate for Cincinnati. Big win for the Bearcats, boosting their hopes when it comes to the NCAA tournament. For the game, Cincinnati shot 58.6% from the field, 50% from 3, 10 of 20. BYU, by comparison, 47.1% overall, just 34.5% from 3. And you just look at it, more and more, BYU has to be able to find a way to play better defense. Other things I'm concerned with in this game. At points, it feels like BYU can get on a little bit of a run when it comes to their offense, and then it stagnates. They've got to get better looks and generate better looks throughout the game. As I mentioned, there are spurts in each of these games, especially in this game. Mihailo Boskovic and Trey Stewart came in and helped BYU put together a nice little run, got them within 8 with about 8 minutes to go, and then it stagnated. It happens too often with this team that they try one thing, it works for a little bit, and then all of a sudden the defense or the opposing team pivots and they counter what you're doing, and BYU seemingly has no answer. And that's the tough part with this squad right now, is sitting at 6-6. They're still very much in the mix for the postseason, but you can't let it get away from you. You've got a big game coming up on Tuesday night. BYU will remain on the road. They're headed to West Virginia to face off against the Mountaineers, who just took care of the University of Utah. The Utes and the Cougars will switch places with Utah now heading to Cincinnati. But BYU's got to regroup here. they've got to understand that the one thing they can control, and there's a lot of controllables, turnovers among them, etc., but the one thing they can control is their effort level on defense. And I'm seeing, like I said, too often big lapses for BYU, and that's going to kill you. Looking at it, opposing turnovers. So BYU had 12 turnovers in this game. Points off those turnovers for Cincinnati, 24 points. It's a big number, and it continues to be an issue for BYU with live ball turnovers leading to opposing teams having big point totals off of them. As compared to BYU, Cincinnati had 11 turnovers. BYU got 12 points, so half that. Now, that number wouldn't have made up the margin. I get that, but still, there is a lot of effort that is lacking at times for BYU. I like the fact that Trey Stewart and Mihailo Boskovic came in cold off the bench and contributed. That was good to see that. Trey Stewart, like second touch of the game, hits a big three. Boskovic hits 2 big threes of his own. But the bigger concern is, like I said, up and down this roster, too many guys taking too many they're not taking plays off, but they're having lapses and losing track of their guys, and rotations are off. It's just not what BYU you would think at this point in the season. We're deep into the season at this point, everybody. We are more than 12 games into a 20-game conference schedule. We're nearing the 2/3 way mark of Big 12 play. You got to think BYU, what they're hoping to do is in the game plans here. But maybe what we're seeing on the court right now, this is what BYU is. A decent home team and a team that struggles mightily on the road. And that's not to be completely unexpected. The Big 12 is a very tough league. It's admittedly very tough to win on the road in the Big 12. But this game against Cincinnati, that was an imminently gettable game going into the contest, and BYU made a mess of it. You allow the home team to blitz you 22-2 out the chute in the second half. Good luck to you carving your way back into that game. It was good to see BYU fight back, but I think down the stretch in this final stanza, what was it? They won a 7 down the stretch for BYU. And then we're talking like the final minutes of this game. So not enough. As I said, offense will come and go. It's just the nature of basketball. Matt Harpring, who used to do Utah Jazz games, talked about, used the term the law of numbers. It's the law of averages, but use the law of numbers. Numbers will come and go. Your shooting percentages, those will vary game to game. Defensively, though, you absolutely can put better effort in there, and I hope that BYU, their coaching staff, will get after him on this. I look at this, and it's not a great showing overall. Like, Jaeger Demon has 12 points on 5 of 13 shooting. He was a decent bright spot, but 1 of 6 from 3. Richie Saunders leads BYU 15 points in this game. Assist-wise, BYU, 14 assists on 24 made baskets. Not an awful number, but just overall, it's not enough here for BYU. You got to see better effort, better play, and sometimes you also got to tip your cap to Cincinnati. Jizzle James, they had some really fantastic shooting nights for Cincinnati, and you got to tip your cap to them on that side of it. But I would have liked to seen a better effort from BYU, particularly on defense here as they move forward. They've got to pick it up. You dropped to 6-7 after going to West Virginia. All of a sudden, you're coming back home against the Kansas State team, which, watch out, Kansas State is red hot. They've won 5 straight. They actually just beat Kansas in the battle for the Sunflower State. That's your game a week from now on Saturday at home in the Marriott Center. You can find yourself in a world of hurt real quick. And if this dropped you to the last team into the NCAA tournament, losing to West Virginia probably drops you out into the first 4 out. And then if you get beat by Kansas State, then where are you at? Very much on the outside looking in after you had fought back to get yourself inside the bubble there. You can find yourself right back on the outside of the bubble. And that's how quick this can come and go for BYU. And they've got to pick it up. They've got to rebound here, and rebound obviously is a relative term, but they've got to find an answer. And I think it starts with defense and, more importantly, with live ball turnovers. Those two things, you can control those two, and BYU's not doing a good job of controlling them at the moment. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this postcast. Just not a good game for BYU. Now they look, like I said, to bounce back as they take on West Virginia Tuesday night out there in Morgantown. Interested to see how they respond after this back-to-back set of losses. I felt like this was a game for BYU against Cincinnati they easily could have had they played their style of basketball, but now they're 0-2 and on a 2-game slide. looking to avoid a 3-game slide when they take on the Mountaineers on Tuesday. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this postcast. We'll have more for you guys on our full edition of the podcast on Monday and Tuesday as well. See if we can hook up with Paul Rockel from Locked On West Virginia, talk a little bit more about that matchup. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.